Welcome to Jennifer Reads. We're thrilled and excited to be a part of the Downtown East Side's 17th annual Heart of the City Festival, which started on October 28th and will run until November 8th. For this special panel discussion, we'll be introducing some guests. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Brusso, Wabishki Mikizi Ikwe. I am Anishinaabe Cree and French from Northern Ontario. I am from the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory in Northern Ontario's Canadian Shield, right at the top of Lake Huron in God's country. It's so beautiful here. And Sule Van Den Dam, I will allow you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jennifer. My name is Tule van den Dam. I am a Dutch settler here on Coast Salish land. I moved to Canada at the age of 9. And I am the program producer for Jennifer Reads.
Thank you, Tule. I'm pretty excited because today we have a couple of special guests. But before I introduce them, just a reminder that we still have books to give away. So you can read along with our daily broadcasts of our youth reading Anne Frank's Diary of a Young Girl. So you can get one of these books and it'll be sent to you for free. Just go to www.jenniferreads.com. That's Jennifer with one N, reads.com. And you will, just follow the path that leads you to getting a book, and we will send you a book because we want you to read along with us. Today we are joined by Dr. Robert Krell, who is a Professor Emeritus. I think I said that properly.
Emeritus.
Emeritus?
Emeritus, yes.
Emeritus of Psychiatry, sorry.
No
at the University of British Columbia, and a child survivor of the Holocaust. What an honor to have you with us. We're going to be speaking with him later in the program. We are also joined by Menno Metsular. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did. Thanks very much.
Okay, good. Author of Anne Frank, Her Life in Words and Pictures, from the archives of Anne Frank's house, where he also works and currently is at this present moment. Am I correct?
Well, no, because the museum is closed as of today. There are new measures in the Netherlands now. So, and we haven't been allowed to go to the office for the past couple of weeks. So it's basically home office.
Okay, so you're at your home office, and we're going to be talking with Menno about a project that he worked on, the Anne Frank Video Diary Project. So Tule, can you tell us a little bit about that project? I've watched it and I love it, but Tule is going to tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, for a bit of context, the Anne Frank Video Diary is a project by the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam that translates Anne Frank's written diary into a video diary. So it follows Anne Frank from the 29th of March, 1944 onwards, as Anne films herself in the events in the secret annex. And the video diary ends on the 4th of August in 1944 when Anne and 7 other people from the secret annex, as well as 2 of their non-Jewish helpers, are arrested. The project stars Luna Cruz Perez, and it brings her story into the 21st century and offers a new way of engaging with her story.
Awesome. Yeah, it is definitely a new way of engaging the story and an incredible way of bringing the story to us and to this generation. Menno Metsular has been working at Anne Frank's House Museum since 1990. He's the project manager for the Department of Publications and Presentations. And over the years, he has written extensively on Anne Frank, her diary, and the secret annex for various age groups. He has contributed to the development of publications, traveling exhibitions, educational materials, and websites. Wow, Menno, amazing. What an honor to have you with us. Wow.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's as I said before, it's great to be sort of back in Canada. Yeah, in a way.
Absolutely. Great to have you here virtually.
Yeah.
So, Menno, Anne Frank House is recognized around the world for hosting and educating about Anne's experience in Amsterdam. why do you feel that going digital with this with video was such an important thing to do?
Well, we always are kind of looking for new approaches to tell the story. For example, a couple of years ago, I worked on a graphic biography of Anne Frank. And so when this company, Every Media, came to us with this idea of producing this YouTube series of the diary and to tell the story of changing the story in such a way that Anne doesn't get a diary for her birthday, but a video camera and films her life, we immediately loved that idea. Of course, we have to be really careful in what we do because, it's very sensitive material. There's always a risk of trivializing or of, just taking it too far. So we did think about it very carefully, and then we started to develop and produce these series. And the main idea is, that I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in the Netherlands, we noticed that less and less children are reading books. So that's why your initiative is so great. Reading books is so vitally important. But at the same time, there's also the reality that many children, unfortunately, don't read books. So we have to find different ways to tell the story. And this is one of the possibilities. And to also to find them where they are, which means on YouTube, for example. And our hope is, of course, that one of the effects of this series is that the children will pick up the book, that it will sort of stimulate them to pick up the book and to want to know more and to also want to read other stories. Because, of course, the story of Anne Frank is only one story. There are so many other stories as well. So, so we wanted to use this way and hopefully encourage children and youngsters to learn more about this period.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was the whole reason that we this initiative for Jennifer Reads began, is to encourage our youth, and this is such a unique way to engage them in this story. I would love to actually show a short trailer for this project.
Sure, of course, yes, please do.
All right. I don't know if we're getting any sound. I'm not sure if we got any sound with that.
I didn't get any sound, no, but
We'll keep on
yes.
rolling forward. For those.
So maybe can I just add something, because you just saw the Luna Cruz Perez, who played Anne Frank, and what for me was very special is that she was 13 years old when we started this project. So she usually in a theater play or in a movie, the actress playing Anne is much older, and so this was also very new for me to have such a young Anne, actually the same age as Anne Frank, which brought it even closer home, even for me, as someone who's been working at the Anne Frank House for such a long time. It was very, very special. And also she was so impressive and really, really acted so well. You really believe her. It feels authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that contributed hugely to the success of the series as well.
Absolutely. Just she moved me, and knowing she was that young and just such a natural, and I think probably, I mean, being that age and being in the house, and that impact of that alone must have been so, this is something that will be with her for the rest of her life and will affect her and anybody in her circles. And it's just amazing that you found such a young actor who fit the profile of Anne so closely. Um, what do you feel like the risk of bringing Anne's story to new platforms and new audiences are?
The risk is mainly if you're not careful enough. That's the
Right.
biggest risk. So we always have to think about, is this not sort of turning into something which people won't believe, or which is taking it too far, or which turns it into kitsch, or which makes it, or which people find it hard to believe, or it doesn't feel authentic. So we really were very careful, and we will always be that careful when we start something like this. Look for the right platform, for example. We thought YouTube was the best platform for this, because there are already quite a few educational videos on YouTube. So we really thought that YouTube would be the best platform for this. And apart from the YouTube series, we also had some educational context videos. So, talking about explaining what the diary is really like, and explaining other issues like what is discrimination, what is scapegoat, so really putting this series into the context to give it some more base, and a sound educational base as well.
And that just finished being produced just this year, is that correct?
Yes, we just finished before everything closed down because of Corona.
Wow.
We finished filming, and they were editing, and we really got it ready just in time.
Yeah, like that timing is just unbelievable. I just like, yeah.
We felt so lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've spent time in Canada giving lectures and engaging Canadian youth to Anne's story. So when and why were you in Canada? And is there anything that stands out about coming to visit our country?
Yeah, it was such a wonderful experience. So I, together with a colleague, I wrote a book for the age group 9 years and older called All About Anne. And that was published in 2016. And in 2018, it was published in Canada by Second Story Press. And the publisher, Margie Wolf, she invited me to come to Canada to give lectures at schools. And so I gave like 18 lectures in schools, Toronto, Ottawa. I spent a lot of time in Hamilton. So I think about 18 schools, something like that, and sometimes even 2 presentations in one school. And the numbers varied from like 30 students in a school library to 600 students in Waterdown District School in Hamilton. So, and what I found so rewarding is that, I spoke for like 45 minutes. And that's quite a long time for students.
Yeah.
But I was surprised at how concentrated they listened to what I had to tell them. And afterwards, there was always time for questions. And sometimes they just couldn't stop asking questions. They really, one after the other, they all had so many questions about their story. So it was just a wonderful experience. I felt so welcome as well, in these schools and in Canada in general.
That's incredible.
Wonderful experience. And you asked me about one experience that stood out. That was that school in Hamilton, the Waterdown District School, because there was a teacher there, Rob Flossman, and in his school he has a museum. He has a historical museum in his school, and and students take care of that museum, and it's dealing with the First World War, but also Second World War, and also current conflicts. And I find that was so special. And also it was so, the students had made scale models of the hiding place, and they had made a little book for me with all their thoughts on Anne. So it's just extraordinary experience. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I think as young people in this country, for a long time, actually, we were probably more educated on your history because of this book and because of the conversations that this book brought about, more so than we were even aware of our own history of the residential
Mhm.
schools and our own, my ancestors' history. I currently host a show on APTN, Aboriginal People's Television Network here in Canada,
Mhm.
called Wild
Mhm.
Archaeology, where I've gotten to experience that history. But this is actually fairly recent for us. So
Mhm.
it's interesting that you should say that you engaged those young people, and they were so interested, because I think we've been engaged in this story for a long time, and it actually gives a context actually to now these stories that are coming up here. The
Mhm.
history that's being brought to light here over the past, I would say 5 years. So the very timely to be talking about this with everything that's happening politically and
Absolutely.
everything that's been happening in 2020. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
what lessons do you find in this story? Why is it worth returning to again and again, and why do you think it's been so read and loved by so many people?
Those are two questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why is the book so loved by so many people, no matter where they live? Otto Frank, Anne's father, he said, it doesn't matter where you live, you always find something in Anne's diary that you will relate to, or that you can relate to.
Mhm.
And I think that's really one explanation. Of course, there are many other explanations as well. First of all, of course, Otto Frank survived. He was lucky. The Netherlands had the highest percentage of Jewish victims of any occupied country in Western Europe. So Otto Frank survived. That was also contributed. He could publish the diary. And other reasons is that, of course, Anne could write. She really had a gift for writing. Another explanation is that you really, it's something, you read something that you won't often see. And that's a very intimate and very sharp reflection on growing up. And to really get these glimpses of someone growing up and struggling with growing up. That's also one of the explanations of the success of the diary.
Mhm.
And of course, also like the Hollywood movie and the Broadway theater play also contributed to the success of the diary and made it well known all over the world. So there are many different reasons, but I think Otto Frank, he said it, there's something in it for everyone, no matter where you live. Yeah. So that's the first question. So second question is the lessons. I still think that we can learn so much from that period in time. Even I've been working for the Anne Frank House for 30 years, and I still learn new things every day about that period in time. So much is being written about the Holocaust. There's so many things I don't know, even after 30 years. And the lessons, of course, look around you. Look at what's happening with discrimination, racism. Again, I think Otto Frank really he thought about this a lot. What to do with this diary and what kind of lessons. And he said, I'm paraphrasing here. He said, look back, reflect on what happened, but act now. Look at what's happening now and fight discrimination and racism and stereotypes in your own circle. So that's mainly the lesson. Something else, and that's something I've learned personally, is that I never thought that I'd say it, but I see more and more the appeal of simplicity, simple messages. And of course, that brings back the 1930s, where people also believed in these simple slogans, and it's, in any country, you'll find people who will use simple slogans to appeal to people and to attract people and to really, get their points across. That's also a big lesson from that time, I think. So don't trust simplicity, I'd say.
Don't trust simplicity. I've been working with youth in this country for probably about 25, 30 years. And one thing that I've always encouraged youth to do, and I do a lot of work in suicide prevention, and just working with Indigenous young people predominantly. But one thing that I always encourage youth to do, and I always have, because I always did, and why I relate so much to Anne, is to write. Because, especially in this time, in these crazy times too, it's really important to take care of our mental health. And that's, something I would say to young people. And before we move on to our next guest, I would love to ask you, what would your advice to young people be, in this time with everything that you've learned from working with Anne Frank's work? What would your words be to young people?
So apart from the things I just said, about the lessons, I'd say, be curious, be curious, be kind, those two things. That would be my advice. Be curious and be kind.
Be curious and be kind.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Menno.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's such an honor to have you with us, and an honor that you're there really, really late at night and joining us.
The honor's all mine.
Awesome. I would now love to introduce our second guest. I feel so blessed today to have two incredible people just sitting and sharing with me, with us, with the Jennifer Reed's panel. Yeah, Dr. Robert Krell, which I mentioned earlier, is a Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at the University of British Columbia. He's a child survivor of the Holocaust. Dr. Krell was born in The Hague, the Netherlands, on the 5th of August, 1940. He survived the Holocaust in hiding with a Christian family from the age of 2 to 5, and then returned to his parents who had survived in hiding. In 1951, the Krells moved to Canada, and he would earn his medical degree from UBC and his psychiatric training in the US. In his private practice, Dr. Krell treated Holocaust survivors and their families, as well as Dutch survivors of Japanese concentration camps. In the late 1970s, he co-founded the annual Symposium of the Holocaust at UBC to teach high school students about the consequences of unchecked racism and intolerance. He is also the founding president of the Vancouver Holocaust Education Center, which opened in 1994. Wow. And with whom he is engaged as survivor speaker, connecting with thousands of students and audiences across North America. Dr. Krell has published and co-edited multiple books. Wow, welcome, Dr. Krell. Thank you for joining us. Are you in the room? Yes, there you are. Oh, you gotta unmute. There we go. Awesome. Oh. There we go. We can hear you now. So okay. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Krell. I see here that you were born in 1940 during the occupation. The Netherlands was liberated in April 1945. So can you tell me about yourself and where you were born, and tell me about how about your family?
I'll try and do that briefly.
Okay. All right.
We've covered so much territory already. Yes, I was born on August 5th, 1940. Holland had been invaded, conquered on May 10th of 1940. So I was born under German occupation at a hospital where part of that hospital had already been secured by the Gestapo for its headquarters. Not a good place for a Jewish baby to be born. Those beginnings, of course, of the first 2 years of my life are out of my awareness. My own personal recollections kick in fairly early, at about age 2.5, roughly around the time of my transfer into hiding, because that was dramatic. It was dramatic and traumatic because I had to leave my parents and adjust to a brand new family, Albert and Violetta Monique, and their daughter Nora, who was 10 years older than I. So I was age 2.5, approximately. Nora was a 12-year-old girl, very happy to suddenly have a baby brother, and she was very good to me. I spent the next 3 years with them. All these happenings were nothing short of a miracle, my great good fortune to land up with them. And I was also fortunate that my parents survived individually in hiding as well. My mother in a small apartment on false documentation papers. My father in the attic of a friend of his. They were partners in the fur business. We all reunited in and around May 5th of 1945, when the war ended. Just a couple of comments about that. One particularly was that liberation was not very liberating for a Jewish child, because that, first of all, necessitated the removal from people who I had come to love as my family and know as my family. So in fact, it was a second separation, although I was hugely fortunate to get my parents back, because most Dutch Jewish children who survived were orphaned. So I was very lucky. My first cousin, the only surviving member of our family, his parents did not come back. That was the son of my father's sister. Why was it not liberating, besides the fact of that particular move back? It was the period of time in which we discovered that everybody was murdered. Everybody was gone. My grandparents had been killed. My aunts and uncles, that is my parents, brothers and sisters, had been murdered. And so there was absolutely no one left but us.
Wow.
This did not all play itself out in Holland. That was also my mother's family in Poland. And one day when I sat with a second cousin of mine in New York, he told me, because he had been a partisan in the forests of Poland, that he counted 156 members of our family murdered. So the days of recovery in Holland after the war were very, very complicated. And you could not imagine a more eager immigrant than I when we left in 1951 for Canada. I sometimes just am astonished at how Canadians are so casual about their country, because it is an absolutely remarkable and promising place, at least to my eyes when I landed. I saw nothing but opportunity.
Amazing.
My parents had to start all over again. So we were poor and without language, had to learn English, of course. And I would say if they were somewhat depressed, I was absolutely exuberant, because I saw all the opportunities of this country, and I just hammered away at it, knowing that I could do whatever I wanted to do. And so that's the briefest resume of
Wow,
that
that's,
particular year.
I mean, your lived experience is so much more than the average person could ever even imagine going through. And of course, it's now become, your lived experience has now become a part of your work, where you engage with the medical and psychological effects of concentration camps and trauma. and just all the work that you do in education. Can you speak more to that, what these effects are, and your approach to treatment of the survivors, you know, with your lived experience and with everything that you do?
I will try. The first essential lesson of surviving the Holocaust is that it never goes away. There have been people who have throughout my life occasionally accused me of being obsessed with the Holocaust. It's quite the opposite. The Holocaust is obsessed with me. There is really no way of escaping its influence. Everything is a reminder. For example, I mean, just small things. Of course, I stayed in touch with my wonderful Dutch rescuers. And so they visited with us in Canada. They were at my medical school graduation, for example. They were at my wedding. Instead of ending up an orphan at my wedding, I ended up with 3 sets of parents. My wife's set of parents, my own Jewish parents, and my Christians, right? So in a manner of speaking, one could say that this insane event that took place enriched my life in a certain sense. And my mother, who was a wonderful woman who spoke truth always, except when she lied in behalf of me to save me, it left me with a lifelong problem of truth speaking. When Mother came to our wedding, she said, I don't understand this terrible event, this Holocaust, but it must have been God's way of giving me a son. So, reduced to its most simplistic interpretation, from a simple woman who was rather wise.
Wow.
In the manner that the Holocaust pursues, when I went into my practice of psychiatry as a young professor at the Health Sciences Center Hospital, where I set up the Department of Child and Family Psychiatry, I was not preoccupied with doing anything about Holocaust survivors. But being a young child psychiatrist and Jewish and known as part of the survivor community, where else would Holocaust survivors take their children, right? These children would have the ordinary problems of all children who come to a child psychiatrist, ADD, gamut. And what happened, of course, when I saw them, for the ordinary business of a child psychiatrist, I discovered that there was another layer of concern, which was they were from Holocaust families. And the Holocaust played an incredible role in the background of their difficulties. And so I began to learn about a sort of generational transmission. And then I began to see the Holocaust survivors, because the parents who liked coming to see me about their children and were struggling with their own memories and concerns felt that they might benefit from therapy. Now, I've never, ever claimed to successfully treated a survivor, because that, I think, was an impossible task. But by listening to them well and working with them on issues of restitution and justice, that was, to a degree, healing. I helped them to speak publicly and teach. I helped them to make audiovisual testimonies. We've made about 120 such testimonies that reside at the Vancouver Holocaust Education Center. And all these things were, in a manner of speaking, healing. And that became a big part of my life. And when you are involved in Holocaust matters, the first thing that Judaism teaches you is that these are not Jewish problems. I don't even think of the Holocaust as a Jewish problem. The Holocaust is a problem of Christianity. Those were one must extend oneself to the wider world, because if there isn't something to learn from the Holocaust, then it has no meaning. And as Elie Wiesel always said, the Nobel Prize winning Auschwitz and Buchenwald survivor, he said, the Holocaust in and of itself was meaningless. We must confer meaning upon it.
Wow.
And that's what you do, meaning on something otherwise would disappear into the darkness of history and deprive our future generations of learning from it. And there is in the field for 20 years and is always learning more. And I find the older I get, the less I know.
Isn't that true? Wow, you've been doing incredible things. I see that you speak to thousands of students annually about the consequences of racism and intolerance. You know, how do you understand the importance of stories like yours and Anne Frank's story for our youth today, and relate the two when you're speaking to these students?
Well, it's a wonderful question. One of the extraordinary things that happened historically is that adult survivors had identified themselves as survivors, primarily those who were in concentration camps, and their children, their offspring, mostly born in around the time of DP camps in Europe, who are now well into their 60s themselves, the second generation, had identified themselves. We children had not. Children were told to keep quiet, not dwell on the past, get on with it, and get on with it pretty well without any psychiatric and psychological help. It's really remarkable that before the war, psychiatrists were worried about a single symptom in a child. Yet, after the war, paid little attention to kids who were traumatized absolutely beyond belief, lost everything, spent 4 or 5 years without food, basically, security, shelter, mostly gone. And they didn't pay very much attention. So it took a while, in the collective sense, to rediscover ourselves as survivors. That happened in and around 1985 to 1995, 40 years after the war. And it is child survivors now, heading into their 80s, as I am, heading into their 80s, who are our main educators left to speak, and have begun to connect their childhood experiences to a warning system for the children of today. Now, that may be sometimes a little bit difficult for children of today to understand, but it is our job to connect these dots for them and to show them that the life of an Anne Frank represents the loss of. She's a precious, almost angelic figure. I love to be a journalist and a writer, and she would have succeeded. And I often think about her, think what would she have written had she made it? How would she have viewed her world today from the one that she experienced at that particular time? She just happens to be one of the 1.5 million who did not have the privilege of living out her life. I did. I had the privilege. I know exactly what I have to do. Teach.
Absolutely.
Teach people warn them, remind them, put back our present into the historical context of that past.
Mm.
There is so much to learn.
The Vancouver Holocaust Education Center, I understand, has played a big role in our truth and reconciliation here in Canada. What experiences have you had where, the genocide of Indigenous people here in Canada touches the conversations about what you're sharing and what you experienced? What sort of involvement have you had in these conversations about truth and reconciliation and our healing of that trauma here?
Sure. Firstly, one of our most cherished speakers, Robbie Waisman, who has been very active with Indigenous relations, and he has been involved with Justice Murray Sinclair. I believe they traveled together through the Northern Territories and spoke. We've had Chief Bobby Joe. He and I spoke together a couple of years ago, and he has come to our Holocaust Symposium, at least a couple of thousand students on several occasions. So he's had an opportunity with Robbie to present different aspects of extreme trauma and its consequences, and perhaps, hopefully, offer some ideas of how to deal with it as well. I've been involved with programs. I recall one at the Museum of Anthropology at BC, where I was with a number of Indigenous leadership to discuss how one commemorates and memorializes our losses and how we deal with these in the future. How do we honor memory? How does it serve us to move on? We did that. Also, I was out at Kwantlen with which I loved, because we concluded our day on genocide with some Indigenous ritual. Which were absolutely with areas of common concern. We know what we're both fighting.
Yeah.
Or should know by now. You're frozen for a moment, have I?
Yeah, you froze for a moment too, but I
been
think
interrupted or?
No. Just I have one last question. Sule might have something else that she might want to add, but you've been instrumental in building up this knowledge and systems of learning that have endured decades, such as the annual symposium on the Holocaust at UBC and a permanent center, the Vancouver Holocaust Education Center. Looking back at your legacy, what's the importance of these public education systems to learn about trauma and the Holocaust? What would you say is, I know the importance for you because this is your story and your legacy, but you've done something that has affected so many others and been instrumental in so many people's lives.
Well, combating prejudice and racism is just an ongoing piece of business every day. And of course, I must never forget anti-Semitism as a rot in society that seems to be permanent and has a resurgence every so often. It's very dangerous to live in a society where anti-Semitism flourishes, because it never ends with Jews. It never ends with Jews.
No.
In Europe, in Europe, those who collaborated with the Nazis didn't know they were next. So while gleefully participating in the murders of Jews, they were participating in the ultimate annihilation of themselves. And that is just the reality. And I try to warn everyone in Canada when I have the opportunity. It's called Canada. It was the Canada compound. It is where the prisoners were stolen of their last possessions before they were murdered in the gas chambers. It was an embarrassment of riches. Some people called it the biggest fur store in Europe. That's where the furs were taken from the women who arrived, where their jewelry was confiscated, their photos were thrown. That was the Canada compound in Auschwitz. Why was it called Canada? Because it was a place of abundance. It was a place of abundance, right? Canada is a place of abundance. If Canada is a place of abundance, let's not bring out.
Oh, did you freeze? Oh, sorry, you froze just for a moment there on my end. Thank you. Yes, and I guess, you know, a lot of what Jennifer reads is kind of a hub that we have created for young people. And so before we open up this conversation to all of the guests and any questions that Tule might have also to ask, what you know, in the pulse of what's happening, especially in 2020, and all of these, you know, so much has unfolded in this year alone, from, you know, COVID and Black Lives Matters, and today, what's happening today on this day that we're having this conversation. Um, what is you know, words of wisdom that you would want to impart to a young person who's listening and taking part in Jennifer Reed's? What is wisdom you'd like to impart in 2020 with this knowledge that you've gained of and all this educating you've done over the years at UBC in your department? What is something that you would like to say to young people?
Basically, it is this: value your education and continue it as long as you can, not just for the sake of reading the story of Anne Frank. Look within its sentences and pursue some of the hints she gives that would be useful to know. At one page, she mentions Hungarian forces in Hungary. She cannot know from her vantage point what has happened to them.
Yeah.
You as a student can look up what happened to the Roma and Sinti, the so-called gypsies, because everything that seemed impossible became possible. Everything that one would imagine cannot be done was done. Can those situations reoccur? They have continued to reoccur. We all thought after 1945 that when the world discovered what they had done, as we were just discovering after the war, how could I know as a little boy? I knew nothing. But I began to know in 1946, 47, 49. They have all been done. Genocides are everywhere. Study, learn, educate yourself. Read until you die. That's not good. Read and be an activist. Learn how to establish yourself as someone who counters these terrible things. You can do it in your school by forming committees. It's very lonely to go up against the segments of society that are the worst of our society.
Mm. Educate yourself.
And so you need that you study together, educate yourself, and be prepared to be activists, because that is what you have to do for the sake of your children and grandchildren.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Krell.
We cannot leave a world like, and absolutely, just to echo Menno, begin by being kind to one another.
Mm. Absolutely. I love that. Those are good words. Be kind to one another and keep educating yourself and keep being an activist. Menno, do you have any reflections to follow up on Dr. Krell's words?
No, I was really listening so closely to everything he was saying. So no, I think a lot's been said. Yeah, still so much work to be done. I'm reminded of Otto Frank, who wrote like thousands of letters to readers all over the world. The youngsters read the diary, and he wrote to Otto Frank, and he answered all those letters together with his second wife. And one letter that was from 1973, and he wrote it to a school in the Bronx, and he said, so you read the diary and it made you reflect, great, but look around you at what's happening now. And that was 1973, so that's like 50 years ago. And if you look around now, I mean, there's still so much to be done. I mean, that's why, I love those words, be an activist and do something.
Because sometimes I can attest to this, that sometimes you're doing, these words are encouraging, because sometimes you are being an activist, and you are continuing to educate, and you don't feel like you're having an impact. And I don't know that Anne ever would have realized the impact that she was going to have on the entire world by the words that she wrote. But I'm really encouraged, Dr. Krell, by those words. In 2009, I was working at the Friendship Center in Vancouver, and my boss's daughter took her life. And right away, and she had been sexually abused by a residential school survivor, and it was the trauma being passed down, which led her to take her own life. And at which point I wrote a play, which I have toured with in Western Canada for the past decade. And since I've been here where I'm at right now in Ontario, I've just finished the final draft to a feature film that I've written that is based off of this play that I've toured for the past 10 years. And let me tell you, like in doing this work, it's sometimes it's, like Anne, you're an unsung hero. It's just now that everybody realized how much of a hero that she was. And so it's just really encouraging to hear those words. It encourages me to continue to move forward with sometimes this work that doesn't feel, maybe I don't feel like I'm doing enough, or, but the lives that have been impacted by just this small piece that I've done, I have no idea, 20 years, 30 years from now, how much what I'm doing now is going to impact in the same way of what you guys are doing and how it's impacting. So thank you so much for those incredible words.
You can never know who you touch. So you keep doing it. You can never know who there is in that audience that is listening with you will turn out to be the next leader.
Absolutely.
You would wish to happen. Everybody's frozen.
Oh, just you froze for a minute. Tule, do you have any questions that you'd like to add?
I do want to be mindful of everyone's time, especially Menno, because it is fairly late in the Netherlands at this point.
It's okay. It's okay.
But It was really a pleasure to listen to the both of you, Dr. Krell and Menno, and I was thinking a lot about what you both said, and Menno, what you said about simple answers and how that there can't be simple answers. And I remember reading in Anne Frank's diary, especially near the end, she seemed really caught up in the contradictions she found in her environment and within herself, and grappling and making decisions within contradictions. And I think that is a huge part of the work, and doing that together.
Yeah.
This is a part of that. Unless, I mean, Jen, if you want to say some words before we show this preview for the event on the 7th.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, one more big Gitchimigwech in my language. I'm Anishinaabe Kwe, Ojibwe from Northern Ontario, and Gitchimigwech, huge thank you to Dr. Krell and to Menno for being here with us, Menno Metsular, for being here with us today. I'm just extremely humbled, and my heart feels full just hearing of the work that both of you are doing, and the incredible impact on people's lives that you have, carrying Anne's work forward and carrying your own stories forward. Yeah, I mean, Dr. Krell, it's just incredible healing work that you're doing. And it really does inspire me to continue forward with what I'm doing as a writer. And to be honest, I'm actually applying for university really soon. So the fact that you said that, I'm like, oh, Creator just confirmed that I'm supposed to move forward with that. So yeah, so I'm moving forward with furthering my education. So I thought I'd let you know that, so you could be proud of me before we leave. So thank you, Gitchimigwech. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
My pleasure too. Thank you so much for including me.
Thank you. So I guess